Welcome back, Global Health students. Climate change is the next driver we're going to explore. Climate change looms as potentially the biggest public health challenge that humans have ever faced on a global basis. As you can see on our global health rubric on the screen, we have economic globalization in the center, which clearly impacts demographic issues, infectious diseases, environmental degradation, water, and now climate change. And you can see how each of these drivers impacts many of the other drivers. Now let's explore climate change. I am not a scientist. However, about 150 years ago, in 1863, the United States Congress wanted to establish a body that would generate trusted scientific truths. An act was passed by Congress and signed into law by good old Abraham Lincoln to create this organization, which is now called the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. Have you ever heard of it? The National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. Well, if you haven't, you should look it up and explore from their website what they do and who are the leading scientists on this fantastic body. This body consists of scientists that has now grown to almost 2,400 unbelievable individuals. About 400 of the 2,400 are Nobel laureates, and most of the others are Nobel candidates. So, when I'm looking for information on true scientific information, I always turn to the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and I hope you will do that as well. Every congressman and senator in need of sound scientific advice and explanations should also look to the National Academy of Sciences. If any congressman or woman should form an opinion on climate change, she or he has not looked to the National Academy of Sciences, then there's a huge issue. Everyone, especially the leaders of our country, our congressmen and our senators, need to look to the National Academy of Sciences if they would like any scientific truths on climate change. This is a quote. Actually, this quote was from a panel of the most eminent earth and atmospheric scientists from the National Academy of Sciences that you see here on the screen. Climate change is occurring. It is caused largely by human activities and poses scientific risks for a broad range of human and natural systems. This is important. In the lower right-hand corner is a recent publication on climate change, advancing the science of climate change. Climate change impacts are both chronic and acute, and we'll explore each of those in the next few slides. The chronic impacts from year 2000 to 2100 will include decreased rainfall in already drought-prone areas, decreased water in rivers fed by glaciers and snowpacks, increased rainfall in already wet areas, and you know what that means, higher sea levels, and we've seen that occurring all over the United States and in the world. Saltwater intrusion into aquifers. We think about the impacts on the animals and fish living in the aquifers. The bleaching of coral reefs and an increased exposure to malaria and dengue fever, which can lead to death. And finally, forced migration due to climate change, which is what is occurring in Bangladesh. They have to leave because their area has been flooded. I sent you a current event article focusing on the forced migration due to climate change. The warmest and coolest years have not differed much in the past, but our new warmest year was in 2012, and the difference was 5.2 degrees, which is truly significant. However, 2017 is one of the warmest years. This was an article from the other day. 2017 is so far the second hottest year on record thanks to global warming. And the only hotter is 2016 because of the effects of El Nino. And this is a NASA global surface temperature data chart on the right over time. And you can see that our global surface temperatures are increasing and increasing and increasing, except for this little blip from January through July. But I'm sure it's going to continue to go up. In addition to chronic condition caused by climate change, as we just saw, climate change will also impact normal climate variability, intensifying this variability to a very dangerous point. And we've seen this in Florida. To clarify, this chart here shows time on the x-axis and a climate variable, either temperature, wind speed, precipitation, on the y-axis. For example, if the climate variable is precipitation, then if we get too much precipitation, it causes floods. If we get too little, then it causes droughts. Normally, these extreme events are only slightly beyond our coping capacity and last for a short period. A week or more for a flood and a year or two for a drought can be significant, or the mega drought that we're expecting. Because climate change produces more energy in the system, climate variability becomes more extreme. As you see going forward, the floods are more extreme and last longer, and the droughts are both drier and longer. Whether these events will occur more frequently remains uncertain. Now let's explore the acute impacts of variability, such as more severe climate events. Both Storm Sandy and Katrina were severe because there was more energy in the system, causing greater winds, and because there was more water in the bay or the Gulf, which is blown by the wind, which causes the higher storm surges. And remember, in Florida, those higher storm surges are what really impact us as well. In Jacksonville in 2012, we set 2 rainfall records. The most rain in a 24-hour period and the most rain in a 48-hour period. But rainfall for the whole year was within a fraction of an inch of normal or perfectly average. Yet we did set these 2 records. Also in Chennai, India, they recently experienced more torrential rains than they've experienced in more than 100 years. It flooded the entire city, which is a very important commercial hub in India. NASA officials are predicting that mega droughts, which are, as I alluded to earlier, droughts of 10 years or more in duration, will occur on a number of occasions in the course of the century. Likewise, because of the torrential rains falling over a short period, we will experience more severe floods. And as you'd expect from all of this excess rain, there's an increased exposure to diarrheal diseases. And oh goodness, what comes from that? All the deaths, especially under our little ones. As we've discussed, climate change exerts both acute and chronic repercussions. What does this mean for you? Well, the world will experience population movements due to floods and droughts, and the victims will definitely need assistance. They will be evacuated with no place to go. The best example of a permanent displacement is with Bangladesh, as we've discussed in the migration section of this presentation. Nearly 5 million people have been displaced due to climate change already, and they're now living in the slums in Dhaka, Bangladesh. Their land has been lost due to glacial melts from the Himalayas, the sea level rise in the Bay of Bengal, and the land subsidence due to their extraction of underground water, trying to cope with climate change in the first place. Now, let's link climate change to our 5 other drivers. Climate change affects the amount and patterns of precipitation, which could lead to floods or droughts. Too much rain will increase exposure to diarrheal diseases. Too little will increase respiratory diseases. Environmental degradation causes climate change. Climate change leads to population migration, such as the climate change refugees we've discussed a couple of times. And the relationship between climate change and environmental degradation is very complex. On the one hand, it has created more industrial nations spewing CO2 in the atmosphere. On the other hand, it promotes pressure on all countries to reduce their carbon emissions. For example, China is emerging as a leader in renewable energies, like we saw on their reforestation on the World Forest Map in dark green. And now we're going to focus on our next driver, which is weapons of mass destruction. But I will pause our presentation here.